for everyone.
If you don't have a chair, speak up now. And we'll get you one. There's also some extras over here if you, there's a chair like.
And there's one in the front row too.
We have a really full house today. That's great.
All right, we're going to start. Danny has some announcements.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if you haven't written down a name tag, there are name tags at the back, right where you enter. So if you would like one, go ahead and make one up. I also wanted to announce our holiday party for the brand, which I'm really excited. I heard some. Oh, Abby is making metal hands over there. Yes, it will be very metal. The party. It's Tuesday, December 10th at 6:30 p.m. at the Bishop in Belcher, which is a pub at 175 Bloor Street East. If you have any dietary requirements, please let me know. You can also email me. I believe it's $10 for non-members and it's free for your member. So you don't need to RSVP, but if you want to let me know your enthusiasm for the party, I would welcome it. We're also going to be trying to bring board games for those of us who like board games. So if you have one you'd like to see, let me know. That's pretty much it. Have a great night.
Could you repeat it?
Sorry. 175 Bloor Street East. The 10th of December, it's a Tuesday night, at 6:30 p.m. is our holiday party. It's the Toronto branch party. The name of the place is the Bishop and Belcher. It's I think it's just bishopandbelcher.com. I don't think there's anything. I don't think there are any thes in the actual URL. Yes.
Does the party have a cute name?
Oh my God. It's funny you should ask, Karen. In fact, Allison Poistra, who is sadly not here due to work, came up with the most wonderful name. It is Yule Blog, because we're celebrating the launch of our new blog, Boldface. So if you'd like to celebrate blogs and the holidays, this is the party for you. So we'll see. I saw another question of you.
Well, I was just going to mention, I've been there before, and it's not right on Bloor. It's very deceiving. You have to go.
Yeah, you do have to go
I got
around.
lost one time, I'm just saying.
Okay, this is an excellent point. It's on, I think it's at the corner of Church and Hayden, I believe, but it is a wheelchair accessible venue, so it is fully accessible. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much more time, so if you have any more questions, let me know.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'd like to welcome Bob Hambly to this evening's program. Bob received his BFA from the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. His simple and friendly illustrations have garnered awards both nationally and internationally. Bob is the co-founder and creative director of Hambly Woolley, a Toronto-based graphic design firm and a frequent university lecturer on illustration and graphic design. If you'd like to know more about Bob and what inspired him to venture design, I encourage you to visit EAC Toronto's blog, which Danny just mentioned. We just launched it, and it's at www.eactorontoblog.com for a recent Q&A he participated in with one of our volunteer writers. Bob joins us this evening to talk about building stories through design, how editors, writers, and designers work together, and how editors can find illustrators while working with a small budget. He'll also show us some examples of what to include when creating infographics and what editors should look out for when editing them. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Hambly.
Did you get the impression that microphone was working? No? Very strong. No? Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah, you have to speak very close to it.
Okay, I'm just going to rearrange some furniture. I don't like these things. The designer in me. I'll allow you guys to see better. And I don't like these things. Everybody get comfortable. I thank you, Andrea, and thank you everybody for inviting me. I usually lecture to design students or architects or interior designers. I've certainly had experience as an illustrator creating creating. Is that helping?
Yes.
Yeah. I've had experience creating illustrations. I mentioned I was an illustrator. I still illustrate a little bit, but I did a lot of freelance illustration before. And did some infographics when the ROB magazine first came out. But now I'm on the other side. I'm the art director. I'm hiring the people to do the illustrations. I've been asked by the Registered Graphic Designers of Ontario to judge infographics. You'll be happy to know that, well, I think you'll be happy to know I am. York Sheridan has a mandatory course now for graphic designers in infographics. And I think you're going to see other schools follow suit, because I believe strongly that this is really the way the world is talking to one another. It seems to transcend ages, race, maybe intellectual level, when you can take your information and boil it down into something that's very visual and forces you as editors and writers to condense it down to the things that are most pertinent, most interesting. So the one thing I haven't done is I've never spoken to anybody, maybe other than people in our office, about infographics. So you're going to have to hang with me. This is my first time. I put some of my thoughts together, and what I'd really like to do is, I think, I've never done this before, if you have questions as I'm going through, why don't you just put up your hand and let's sort of learn this together. I'm very much open to if people have a different point of view or don't agree or have something to add. Tonight's the night to do it, right? Let's sort of figure this out together. I'm sitting here looking at my type, and I realize that it's not my type that's wobbly, it's the screen. Boy, that's not good design. The company I'm with is Hambly Woolley. That's my last name and my wife's last name, hence the pig and sheep at the bottom, if you're wondering. Fortunately, I'm represented by the pig, and my wife is represented by the sheep. Barb and I met while she was working at Saturday Night Publications, and she hired me to do, actually, charts or infographics for a publication for Shell Canada. And I know one person in the room who's met her. She's a lovely woman. I fell in love with her immediately. We got married and eventually started a firm together. We've had Hambly Woolley for 23 years now. We do magazines, everything from larger publications to smaller ones, and we help people redesign and hand it over to in-house designers. So I think I come with a little bit of experience, but maybe a little intimidated with a room full of editors. So let me walk through my thoughts. If you have anything you want to add, please, or you're not sure what the hell I'm talking about, please let me know. What's really wobbly down there?
Don't worry.
Look at that. Okay, audience. Just like you as editors, you really want to understand your audience, and I would assume with whatever publication it is that you're working on, you've probably had some good meetings and good discussions about who's actually reading your publication. So I think it's important that when it comes to infographics, you do the exact same thing. So what's going to interest your reader? Now, the words and the stories you write are one thing, but when you're going to translate something into graphics and images, it's another thing. And I think you have to stop and think, here's what they like to read about, here's what they learn, what would we turn into an infographic, and what's going to interest them? And number two, why should they care? Why should they care that you took this particular story or this set of information and turned it into an infographic? Because I think what you're going to see as I go through this, I'm going to show you many samples of infographics. Sometimes people choose the oddest thing to turn into an infographic. And you kind of go, why did you waste your time doing that? Appropriate style of graphics. So I'll get over this wobbliness soon. Appropriate style of graphics. I would assume that the publications that you work on have gone to great lengths to develop a graphic standards guide for what the publication looks like. The fonts you're using, how the type is set, the text is set, the colors, the tone, what kind of art you would have or not have. You want your infographic to feel like it's part of those standards that your publication has already established. Not that it has to be slavish to the standards, but I think you want it to complement what kind of publication you have. If you have something very conservative, you don't want to have infographics that are pretty wild, and vice versa. And this is a big one for me. You really have to put the appropriate amount of detail and information into your infographics. So, I was fascinated, is it almost 2 years ago? When was the last Pope elected? A while ago.
This year.
How long?
8 months.
8 months ago, seems like 2 years ago. I was fascinated when this happened to look at the infographics that came out. And I'm going to show you 3 sets of infographics. And can you do it without talking to the people next to you? Take a look at the infographics and tell me which of the 3 you think are most effective. Now I have a question, yeah.
Just a quick question. By infographic, do you mean illustration? Is that what
It's taking the information and showing it graphically.
Okay, so
And you'll see, that's a good question because it's a little open, isn't it? As we go through this, you'll see how graphics are interpreted. Some are illustrative, done with photography, icons, typography. You're going to see a range of things. So I'm hoping that will be answered as we go through. So the Pope gets elected, and a number of publications are trying. I'm standing right in front of you, sorry. Many publications are trying to figure out how do we get this information to our readers. So here's sample number 1. Number 2. And number 3. Now, there's no right answer here. Let's remember we're talking about the audience. So in your own mind, make a decision of which one you feel best about. Let's go back to it. There's number 1. We'll call that the conclave. Number 2, the papal election. And number 3, the voting process.
And what is your question?
First of all, my first question would be, which one as a viewer do you like?
3.
Okay, hands up for 3. Okay, hands up for 2. Hands up for 1. Okay. So it's leaning toward, now there's no right answer here, but I want to walk through and explain this to you. So 3 was the majority of the people, and 2 and 1 were similar. Here's the next question. What publication do you think each one of these appeared in? And I hate to tell you this, I don't know the answer, but I think I think we can guess. So here's number 1. Pardon?
Was it the Globe and Mail?
That's a dating.
Going to have to do
There's a series of books designed for kids. The logo is like 2 Ds facing each other.
Yes. Yes. That's. I know exactly who you mean. Do you think that's from that book?
It's very similar style to one of the books on ancient Rome that I have.
It's very similar to how they do their graphics. And I wish I could tell you what the double D's means. Pardon? Just what she said. Number 2 and number 3. What publication do you, or type of publication do you think it was in? Okay, let's go back to number 1. What do you think that was in? A book.
Eyewitness travel guides.
Eyewitness travel guide. Who do you think the audience was?
Somebody going into Rome.
For my money, that to me looks like it's geared directly to Catholics. And here's 2 reasons why. It's remarkably detailed. It's overly detailed. And it has a color palette that is predominantly gold and red, right? So, first of all, well, let me come back. I'm going to graphically analyze these for you. Number 2.
It looks like it does look newspaper-ish, just that it's black and white, sort of associated press standard kind sends across North America.
That
Right.
level of detail would be a lot of work for newspapers running a physical one.
It would be, wouldn't it? That's a lot of the cost to put that together.
Weekly magazine.
I would say this is more like a weekly magazine, Time, Newsweek, something like that. They'd have the budget to be able to do that, and they would probably, well, maybe all these publications, probably preparing these for quite a while. They have the luxury of time on their side. And number 3, I know this one because it's in the bottom corner. This appeared in the Wall Street Journal. For my money, and I'm going to go back through them, this is my favorite. I think it's clean, it's clear, it's easy to follow. They've given us the information about the voting process and then thrown a couple little things in, like this overhead diagram of where St. Peter's fits in within the Vatican City. It's taking a lot of information and presenting it quite clearly. The one that took me a little while to figure out is, it's the voting process, and here's visually how you go through, which I really love because it's on a horizon line. So the other thing for us to remember, and you're going to see this come up quite a bit in the examples I showed you, readers do read, or North American readers read left to right. And we tend to go in a circle that way. What happens here, if the first vote is successful and white smoke comes out, then you go straight ahead and you elect. This, I figured out, is if it doesn't, you go back to the start and you start the process over. It's reinforced in the type here. That's how I figured it out. I don't think that's the best. Was that clear to you initially that that's what?
I see the two small.
Now you see the 2 smokes. This, I'm not sure they need it, but it's interesting about the schedule. And typographically, there seem to be bite-sized chunks of copy that are very clearly associated with an image, aren't they? So that you don't get lost. Things that you would think are just so fundamentally basic, but you're going to see people mess that up. Let's go back to this. This is like the art director and the editor and the designer got together and said, can we fit one more thing in here? And here's where I have issues with it. And this is not necessarily an editor's job, it's an art director's job. But as an editor, when you look at content, here's what I would like you to notice. First of all, the main parts of the illustration are presented to you axonometrically. You know what that means? There's no vanishing point. So there's a grid. There's literally a grid on the base here. You see these lines? Do you notice that the lines going this way never go to a vanishing point? They're parallel. And the lines going this way are parallel. And that's true of all the buildings. That's called axonometric, where all the lines head straight and they never converge both ways. It's a type of drawing that architects use predominantly because it explains a space and a building very clearly. As soon as you introduce perspective and foreshortening, it gets complicated. So it was a good idea because it establishes a basis by which to present the image. It falls apart because what you're doing is you're orienting people on these 45-degree angles. Well, then all of a sudden they come and they sit a chart directly over top of it that is on a flat plane and runs counter to. They start labeling the same way, and then they put things, this building and this building, nothing is in ratio to one another. Look at little tiny Italy, and here's the Vatican, the map we saw before, and then here's the papal. Can somebody help me with what that is? The papal coat of arms, done 3-dimensionally. Let's not show it flat. Let's get some dimension in there. Let's get this scroll with shadows and highlights. That's not where does your eye go? That's the other thing, is you want to have a focus and you want to direct a person around the page. So, and the color, oh my goodness, there's just too much color here. But I think if you had lots of time, so those who said a textbook, it may work because you could come back to it time and time again. This one falls somewhere in between. Although I'm really, and I'll talk about it in a bit, I'm really uncertain where I go. And this will come up. You really have to hold the hand of the reader as you're taking them through a graphic. Because sometimes, and I'll show you examples, if the reader is not directed, they're going to start to read information out of order. And when it's out of order, it's not the text and the story you're trying to tell is not going to be clear. There's more white space here. They didn't attempt to put it on some sort of plane. They've got the Cardinals out back here at the barbecue or something. So the main point there for you, or that I'd like to get across, is your audience. If you were producing this for a Catholic magazine that went out to an audience that was, not to say that only Catholics would be interested in this, or a book where you had more time, I guess this would work. But I still have, from a designer's point of view, a lot of issues with it. This in a Newsweek or a Time or a Maclean's magazine, I think works really well. It's fairly orderly. And this to me is absolutely perfect for a newspaper. So number one is your audience. As I say, you've established what your audience is for the editorial side of things. Make sure that when you're producing an infographic, that it suits your audience. Is it too busy? Is it too much? Is it too little? Do they even care about it? So number two, accuracy. When you're doing infographics, it's imperative that you have your information down absolutely pat. I'm going to jump ahead, but here's one reason why. One of the benefits, does anybody here work on a publication where they take any of their information that's put online? Which is happening more and more. Infographics are absolutely ideal to put online because they work as a single unit chunk, they tell a story. So if you're not doing it and you have the budget and the wherewithal to do it, I would encourage you to do it because it's a great thing to post online or even send out independently so that people get a flavor for your publication, a taste of it. Once an infographic goes out and if the facts are not correct, it's gone out there, right? It's in the world and it's hard to get it back. So how recent was the information? I think we're all guilty of, we go onto the internet to find out a fact, and it's a great tool for that, I love it, but I'm always double checking, triple checking a source to make sure, is that actually true? And in this case, how relevant, how soon is it? Are the sources reliable? I'm not entirely sure how you check that, but if it's coming from a news feed or from a university or someone who's reputable, then I think you feel comfortable going ahead, making a commitment to actually making it into an infographic. And like I just said, I would never ever take one source as the gospel. I think it's important that you check 2-3 times to make sure what you're about to commit to is actually right. And this is a bugaboo for me. The imagery within the infographic, make sure it's correct. Can anybody explain to me when I say medical, what's the icon? What's the symbol that the medical world uses? Pardon? Yeah, the snake, and what's it called? A caduceus, right? It's a staff and snakes. How many snakes? One. How many people think there's 2? A caduceus with 1 snake means medical. A caduceus with 2 snakes, this is the illustrator in me, means commerce. So you'll actually find a number of associations, professions out there who have used the caduceus incorrectly. They're actually saying that they're in business to make money. And you go, whoa, that's not really what you want from the manifesto. That's one of the best examples I can find. Another one is, what's the symbol for Red Cross? A Red Cross. What's the symbol for Red Cross in... That's actually the origin of the Red Cross, right? No, in the Middle East, because the cross actually came from the Swiss flag, and the Swiss flag, it goes way back to the Holy Roman Empire, when the armies were marching through and they had big banners with a cross on. That's how Switzerland, through many iterations, ended up putting it on their flag. It was a Swiss fellow who started the Red Cross, and he went to the thing that he knew and made it the Red Cross. So for certain faiths to say, we don't identify with Red Cross when it comes into our country or our area, because to them it represents Christianity, and that's the root of that image. So what is the Red Cross? Is the Red Cross everywhere?
No.
How many Red Cross symbols do they have?
3 that I know of.
Okay, what are they?
The Red Cross, Magen-David with a dome, and the Red Crescent.
That's right. And Israel's trying to get them to use a red Star of David, but they won't authorize it. They won't authorize it.
What was the second one?
The Red Star of David, at least in Israel. I don't know if they're actually affiliated with the Red Cross, but that's what
They're not officially. So, about 5 years ago, the Red Cross came up with a new symbol. It's not a Red Cross. It's not a star. It's not. Does anybody know? It's not a crescent. It's a diamond, an outlined diamond with a hollow middle. And I have seen, because I lectured on this because I was astounded by how many versions there were. I found the Red Cross online, the Red Cross Graphic Standards Manual, and you are allowed to use each one of those and each one of those together. It is the most convoluted branding system I've ever seen. And it's unfortunate because it had earnest beginning, but as the world gets smaller and their influence goes further, they've had to adapt. That's a long-winded way of saying, make sure you use the right symbol when you're representing words or ideas graphically. You've got to check that. I once gave this lecture to, it was a webinar to design students, and one of the questions I got at the end, and I was a little bit flabbergasted, how do I answer this? Somebody said, why would it matter if the caduceus was wrong or right?
Did you answer?
Yeah, after I picked my jaw off the floor, I said that's our job as communicators, whether we're writers, editors, art directors, illustrators, photographers. We are there to communicate what's going on out there, and you can't miscommunicate. So accuracy. Any questions there?
Just that some things that seem fantastic will turn out to be completely fabricated, like further myths.
Yes, yes. So that's back to an editor doing the research. And I can imagine at times that would be difficult, but you're right, there are some things that may be in the popular culture that we believe are true, and they're not.
Even reputable news agencies are guilty of re-quoting stuff.
Yeah, from an incorrect source, this is wrong.
So-called truth because they're reputable, but if they didn't check their sources, then they'd be wrong.
That's right, that's right. So look at this graphic here. This is, I'm going to have to read this for you. I don't think I can get it. Look at it closely. This one came out first, and this one came out second. And look closely, there's one thing that's different. Where is it? Yeah, 97 and 43. They found out that this number was wrong. And you want to hear what it says? This one is shocking. 97% of middle schoolers have been bullied online. Oops, sorry, we're wrong. That should have been 43%. Could you imagine if you were a parent and you saw that information and it was 97%? So they quickly had to retract it, print it, and do it again, but that's out there. Now that's an extreme example, but boy, that's not good. Point of view. Your magazine has a point of view, your publication has a point of view. Your stories, each one of your stories has a point of view. Well, your infographic should definitely have a point of view. It can be strong, it can be a little more subtle, but it's important that, like a story, you're trying to tell something. So you want to clearly establish the subject, the problem, or the point of view that your infographic is all about. If you just throw it out there and there's no title, or if it's not apparent what it's all about, you haven't captured your reader. Readers like stories, and they need to be guided along. I think an editor needs to help me with that sentence. When it comes to graphics, when it comes to imagery, the reader does really need to have their hand held. Could you imagine that very first infographic of the conclave? And I'm going to show you a couple of other examples. If you don't know where to go next, you'll get lost. And as a result, you're not telling the story clearly. Or, maybe worse, the reader gets frustrated and just leaves the infographic and goes, I don't know what they were trying to accomplish there. And ultimately has negative thoughts about the publication. What information to include, but maybe equally as important, what not to include. In the conclave, did we really need to see a blown up full 3-dimensional version of the crest? You know, it's an interesting crest, but boy, there's a lot of more important things there to be seen and digested. So make sure that your information is reinforcing your point of view, not hindering it. And let your story lead the infographics, not the other way around. And you can tell them that Bob Hambly, the art director, if you're dealing with an illustrator and art director and it goes the other way, tell them that's wrong. It should be led by the information, not somebody comes in and got a great drawing. I've got a great drawing of what the Pope looks like just before he comes and meets the public. We don't care. We don't want that. It may look nice, but don't let your graphics alter and change your story. You're the editors. The story is important. Make sure that that gets first bill. What the hell is going on there? So it's sort of established, it's established what we're looking at, how our laws are made. I love this typesetting. You can drive a bus through here, right? How our laws are made. Oh, that's pretty clear. I see what we're doing. I understand. I've looked at this many times. I have no idea. I guess it's a bill, and then when we walk down this path of multicolors, we'll end up with a law. And we'll go to publication, and we'll go to community work. Typographically, it's absolutely a mess. And I'm sorry it's not, when we get into smaller type, you can't see it. The people. Let's emphasize the word the. Yes. What? Representative. Not even where the syllables break. Just make it up as you go. That is. There's an example where I'm sure all of us, well maybe not all of us, all Americans would like to know what happens when something is presented as a bill and all the stages has to go through for a law, to become a law. You look at this and you go, this is not helping me. It sounds confusing, and guess what? According to you guys, it is confusing.
Where is it from? Where did you find that?
Where did I find this? It was on Google somewhere. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a smart ass, but no, I combed many examples of infographics, and that's where I found it. Bad boy, right? The editors think, where's your source? Where is that from? I'll make a note of that. The next time I talk to a room full of editors, I'll have my sources, right? Sorry, I don't know. And here's something you've got to, as an editor, your art director should look after this, but as an editor, I've worked with a lot of editors. Do not push aside your gut feeling about what you look at visually. Trust your gut feeling. You may not be trained as an art director, but if it just doesn't feel right, usually something's wrong. This has this little arc and everything, and it has some extra space. What is that? You know, if that's a sign of bad design and art direction, just because there's a space, it doesn't mean it has to be filled. Really, what they should have done is made these boxes larger and pulled them out so that they were more legible. So, hierarchy, the order, it's completely a mess here. I just don't, that's pretty clear, right?
Come on, it has a legend.
So how do you play this? Will it take legs or a spinner?
Yeah, it does look like a board game, doesn't it?
But surely it should be the case that legends be kept to minimum. You shouldn't have to go back and forth.
You know, that's a very good point. There literally is a legend here. I don't think any infographic should have a legend. We're not playing a game. I wish we all had this. Well, no, maybe it's good we don't have a version where we could read all of it up close. And, you know, wrapping type up and around in a curve, that's just a no-no. You can't do that. The point size of the type is all over the place. There's no consistency visually to this. There's no sense of order. Anyway, let's move on. It's giving me a headache. Hierarchy. I think it's important within your infographic to establish a hierarchy of information, just like you would with your publication. You have an index page, and here's everything you're about to see in the publication. And then when you get to a story, here's the head for your story, here's the deck, you get into the body copy, simple things that we all take for granted. You would do the same thing in an infographic. You want to organize the person when they arrive at the page. What is it I'm looking at? What's the next thing you want me to look at? And hold my hand through this because I need help. The overall theme and message should be evident. As soon as you look at it, you want to know, if I read the head and I see the imagery, there's a connection. You need to create a flow of this. If you walk away with anything today, I hope this is it. Create the flow of information. Think of the ones you've seen already. It needs to be clear, which gets back to, are there things we have to eliminate? Are there things that we're saying and we're not explaining them well enough? It has to be concise. We've seen that you don't have a lot of room for copy, so up to the writers and the editors to take any copy that's reinforcing the image to be right to the point. It has to be logical, not only what's being written, but the flow is logical. Orderly, so that you're moving in some sort of logical, back to logical, order, left to right, in a circle, however you're directing, it's very clear. And if you break that, you're going to have to guide them with arrows or some sort of flow. And is it digestible? I think the purpose of infographics ultimately is to take something complex and boil it down so it's digestible. Otherwise, you either make a really busy infographic, which is kind of counterintuitive, or you don't make one at all. Just let your words, let the story tell it. Now here's one that I actually quite liked, but I get lost where I'm supposed to go. So let's assume that there's a gutter here, and this is so it's established in a box up here. I mean, I'm sure we all went here first. And it says, all work and no play, the overworked American. So it's establishing the point of view, what it's all about. And then it has a little paragraph that's explaining what that's all about. Let me read it to you. In the past 2 decades, the US economy has experienced a nearly 60% increase in productivity. Unfortunately, it's been built on the backs of American workers who are laboring longer hours for lower pay, laboring without a U. But that's okay. It's American. So, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to just tell you what that says and that says. The top one says, Americans are putting in long hours. And it proceeds to talk about the hours they're doing. The one below it says, and they have less vacation. This is a little car with luggage on top of it. And there's France that has, and I'll get to this about how you use imagery, but France has, they've got lots of vacation, America has, they have no luggage on top of it. And then up here, it says, post-recession work exhaustion. Over here it says backlash, and down here it says invisible labor, the unpaid work. I guess you can make an argument that, now, for me, it introduces it here. I want to go here next. I don't think that that's where they want you to go. I don't think you're lost if you go there. I think they want you to go here. I think they want you to read down the page and then come up here. When you produce a spread, most people typically want to go like this. They want to go across and then down, or across and back over. So here's a case where I think the graphics are nicely segmented, well organized in a pretty simple grid, overall grid, but they've lost us as to what order we go in. What saves this is this infographic does not fall apart if you don't read it in the exact order. But I do think that the hierarchy here, graphically I kind of like it. The hierarchy is off.
But there is a rule in the middle of it.
There is a what?
A rule.
A rule? Right. So
It's not halfway.
I think your gutter might be, it's not quite halfway, is it? Yeah.
It was all the way down.
So let's assume that this was, or either that or somebody had the luxury of making a big wide magazine, or it was small on one page, which would be way too small.
I have a question.
Yeah.
About that image.
Yes. Let's go back.
Do you have a problem with the mixing units, like 1/3 versus a percentage?
I personally don't. I think the other thing with an infographic is you want to keep your readers, you don't want them to get complacent as you go through, but I do think that's a good point. That would be an editor's call. Do you want to be consistent? I think you want to be consistent when you're talking about measurement, that you stick with, whether it's imperial or metric. I guess you can make an argument here that it's percentage sign and then you're showing fractions.
And I'm just curious about that thing that might be a punch clock.
Yes.
What does it say above it?
That is a punch clock. Total minutes of unpaid work per day. And then over here, where you take your form out of the wall to put in the punch clock, it took me a little while to figure that out. But that's what that is. And the width of the piece of paper you put in the punch clock is telling you the bigger it is, the more hours of unpaid work. So in Mexico, which is at the bottom, it is, I can't tell you, 185, and Korea is 79.
So that's what you call a visual metaphor?
And you, absolutely, and you're going to see lots of visual metaphors used in infographics.
Yeah.
And you're going to see lots of variations of success with it. So that's a case where the illustrator has to work with the art director, and it should be vetted there first. The art director says, I'm not really sure what's going on with the punch clock. And then the art director should take it to the editor, and the editor goes, punch clock? I saw a face with a big mouth. So I think that's important that as it goes through the chain of command and looking at, and here again, if you're an editor and you see something like that and it just is not working for you, I encourage you. Some of the best relationships we've had as designers with Meg, the best ones are when we're really close and work well with good editors. I'm looking at one right now. That's important. There's a real give and take. If it's not working, and I'd like to think that when it comes to the words, if we're reading something or putting ahead, and it doesn't quite make sense to us, that we are open, or the relationship is open enough for us to comment as well. Yeah.
Could you comment on the sort order of that punch card graphic? They don't seem to be in ascending or descending or alphabetical, or why that order? Maybe there's a reason, but I don't know.
Well, the United States is in the middle, but there's ones that are further. You know what? I didn't notice that. That makes no sense. You'd think it would be on an angle, wouldn't you? They may have determined that if it was on an angle, it would be too predictable. That's the other thing you have to be careful with, and it's a fine balance. If your images become very predictable along the way, I do think you lose the viewer. Hence, using a third as opposed to percentage. If they were all percentages, some people may just zone out. There's no hard and fast rule to that. I think that's up to you as an editor and the art director to figure out what you think is working the best. It's a little unfair. We really don't have the luxury of seeing this really crisp and clean. Would help it somewhat.
What's all that stuff in the lower right?
What's all the stuff in the lower right? Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. According to the DECB, unpaid workers include shopping, volunteering, routine housework, travel related to unpaid work, care for household members, and care for non-household members. You see, it really is an interesting bit of information, but it misses somehow, doesn't it? And I think it's, the other thing is, on the page visually, this is the biggest thing. Is that the most important thing? Maybe for them it was, but remember, people will also, they're gonna gravitate to things that are larger. Again, it comes to a hierarchy, it comes to a visual hierarchy. So you can have a hierarchy within the information, how it flows on the page itself, and then you can have a visual hierarchy as to how the imagery relates to other images. So I think this is successful on some levels, but when I looked at it, I was confused as to where I was to go and what I was to do. It's also a very regimental form of illustration. Everything is very angular and based on, again, there's no vanishing lines here. It's not axonometric, but so it's very stylized, which I think works here, not here so much. Even these cars, this color and these suitcases, I had to look at that for quite a while.
Is there a background texture?
There's a background, I think there's lines. It was meant to be like a yellow line paper, which probably doesn't help at all. You guys are good. You're calling me. If I miss something, I'm doomed. Here's one where the hierarchy is just gone. It does have plastics breakdown and an introductory paragraph in the right place. And then, like the other one, it has two heads, but when I get in here, it's visually kind of nice to look at. They've, like you, when you're laying out a story, it's got a pull quote or a sidebar, but it's a sidebar, an infographic sidebar. I kind of like that, where they've isolated information within it. So here's an overall diagram of the creatures living underneath the sea and how plastics affect them. Everything from nets to garbage getting caught on their body to, I think, the type of food, how it influences the food chain, small plastics, big plastics, where the hot pockets, I've read several books about this recently because I'm fascinated by it. Don't read books about our oceans if you want to have a nice holiday. It's just, it's depressing. So I guess in many respects I was attracted to this because I like the overall feel to it. I like the animals weren't all rigid. They were more organic and flowing. There wasn't a real established grid there to walk me through it, but ultimately that's why this fails, because I don't know where I'm to go next. And you can argue, well, these are individual facts, but I think you get lost.
What's it say on the side of the boat?
Side of the boat up here, one world, one ocean. And here is, so you've got two styles. You've got this little, let's call this a little more organic illustration. And then you've got something that's more symbol-like, sitting in the sidebar, which I think is fine because it's differentiating itself from this. It is a different language. It's still sharing the same color palette, so it belongs there. But it's a different set of information. So it was probably done by the same artist. It's more, as I say, more iconographic. It's more symbol-like. So that's fine. Then you get into a map that is flat, and then you get into a sort of a timeline here. I think those 1, 2, 3, 4, those elements work. It gets a little confusing when there's a fish coming in front here and this guy's in behind, and part of the illustration comes up over here. It needed, an art director needed an editor to go in and say, this isn't quite working. Point here is, it's our job as art directors and editors to look at the hierarchy of information. What do you want your reader to walk away with? Visualize. Engage the viewer. If you get to an infographic, if you're going to spend the time and effort to do it, you want to engage them. And that doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of money. It doesn't mean that you have to have a lot going on. It just means that you have to go back to those 5 steps. It's got to be orderly, organized, planned, and have imagery that is going to get somebody excited. It's very easy when you start working with icons and symbols to fall into things that are predictable. And to a degree that's important because you want people, when they look at an oil drum is an oil drum and that says oil to all of us. If you start to get a little cute and you try something else, then people have no idea what it is. I guess the secret there was make the oil drum look fitting. I'm not saying make it look exciting, but make it engaging. Translate numbers and data into compelling images. When you just write a number in an infographic, you're kind of defeating the purpose of doing an infographic. You want to translate it into a chart, an image of some kind, so that it starts to take on something else. People will be attracted to that. That's why they're looking at an infographic. Have a good balance between the text and the visuals. You don't really want to have a lot of text, but you need the right amount of text there to reinforce or explain the visuals. So try to get a good balance between the two of them. And style of graphics. First of all, what I'd like you to consider is what's best for the story. If you were to establish a look for your infographics that you thought, this is what our publication should always do, I would question you to say, you may want to have some standards as how you do that, but does it suit the actual story? So the one with the fish, to me, works really well because fish and underworld is flowing and organic, as I said, and I think that style works really well. If they were really angular and geometric looking fish, people wouldn't relate to that as well. So make sure that you consider what that imagery is going to be. And if your publication, if you're making a commitment to infographics and you want to have more than one in a publication, like in one issue, or if you want to do it in every issue, I think it's worth sitting down with the art director and figuring out some sort of guidelines as to how you're going to do this from issue to issue. Because otherwise, it will look a bit like a dog's breakfast if every time you do an infographic it has a new style and a new look done by a new artist of some description. And that gets to be, do they complement the publication's personality and their graphic standards? And let me show you a couple of examples. I quite like this one it's a little confusing, but when you read it, there's just individual bits of information that aren't necessarily linked. But what's nice is they've actually taken a photo of a cup of coffee. They've made the rings from that the coffee leaves, the spills, and used those to itemize certain bits of information. I think that's quite captivating. You know, if you came across a magazine, all of a sudden you saw that could be a drawing of a cup of coffee, but all of a sudden you have an actual cup of coffee that's spilling, and I think you're drawn to that. I'm not sure that this is the most effective. Here's where the numbers are just getting bigger. You know, that could have been a coffee bean getting bigger, or a bag of coffee, or something. I think that that's not as well considered as it could be. Here's a really adventuresome. This is about how many Americans have tattoos. You know, that's wonderful. I gotta think that this is Photoshop. There is a story. A famous American graphic designer. Has anybody heard of Stefan Stegmeister? He's originally from Germany. He did a poster. This is the absolute truth. He took off his shirt, and it was a poster for some event, and he had one of his designers carve it into his chest with a razor blade. He literally had it cut into his body, and they photographed it. And he had done enough research to know that with a razor blade that all those cuts would heal and go away. The design world, the crazy design world, went crazy for this because it was so brilliant, so different. A little gruesome. You talk about catching your attention, it did. So that's why I said, if somebody's going to cut themselves, somebody might make a tattoo, but of course that's not what was done. I'm not even sure that this was done with markers. I think this may have been done separately and then all photoshopped to go around the body. But boy, it really catches your attention. And if you're talking about tattoos, talk about point of view and having imagery that relates to what you're talking about. So that, if you want to make sure that this is an extreme case, but the imagery is really captivating. It's really making you want to look at it. Down his arm, here, just out of interest, 24% have no tattoos. 22% have one tattoo. 18% have two tattoos. 18% have three tattoos. 11% have, I'm not sure what it is. So it's telling you the population of what the breakdown is, how many tattoos they have. Across the body right here, I don't know if you can read it. The 3 reasons for regret because of the person's name in the tattoo, don't like the way it looks, it was stupid. Here's an infographic I think is a total fail. Really all they've done is taken the numbers, made them large. They haven't visualized them. Not that everything has to get cute, but it's boring. If you're going to go to that, there's the United States, thank you, and there's a picture of Obama, but it just doesn't do it. Here's a case where I bet you all know what that's from. What publication is that from? National Geographic. There's my point about having standards. You know if you've looked at National Geographic, they would have a variety of ways it's done, but it always says National Geographic. Now, compare this to the tattoo one. This is back to audience. This is right for the audience of National Geographic. The other one was for Tattoo Monthly. I'm just making it. But you wouldn't put that in this magazine. It wouldn't be appropriate. And I'll bet if you go back, National Geographic's been doing this kind of thing for decades. I wouldn't go as far as to say they started this trend, but they certainly have always taken great advantage of good infographics. Tools. Now, infographics can cost money to do. They're not cheap. If you have a good in-house designer, they could do it themselves. or you would hire somebody to do it. And there's a lot of work back and forth to make sure it works. And you know, oh, we've cut a little bit of type, we've added some type, we're gonna have to move that illustration around. We just sold another ad, we're gonna make that 3/4 of a spread, not a spread. These are two programs that you can buy that come complete with all that imagery and much more imagery, so that you can purchase one of these, and I'm sorry I don't know the price, and your art director would have at the ready, you know, little people, pie charts that they can go in and change, expanding timelines, a whole collection of icons to use, some maps, and give them the foundation by which to create their own graphics. So if you're on a budget, you can do this. And I found two, I'm sure there's many more. This is something that was created out of their program. That's not available, but all those images are, and somebody created it with the images provided by this. So I think that's good news. I don't like to come to a group and say, to make infographics, you gotta have a gazillion dollars and lots of time. That's not the way the world works, and that's not the way, right, in publication nowadays, that's not the way the world works. So I found this to be encouraging. I think you just need a art director or designer who's gonna be competent and make this work.
Okay.
And then I thought I would show you some of my favorite infographics. This is a hamburger, the economics of America's favorite food. They took an actual hamburger and pulled it apart. So there's the bun, the mustard, the ketchup, the onions, the tomato, the lettuce, the cheese, the burger. And they ran that right down the middle. So if you were to open this page up or wherever it is, bam, we know we're talking about hamburgers. And then as you go off on beautifully organized on either column, it starts to talk about individual things. Like next to the mustard is a little mustard bottle, and it's divided, it's cut according to the types of mustard people like. And they like yellow mustard the most, and brown mustard next, and garlic mustard, and other, and I don't know what the last one is, sorry. This is probably from America. They don't have Dijon. Favorite burger buns, styles of buns up here. Favorite cheese. Anyway, it's a really nice way to establish what it's all about. There's a hierarchy. It's very orderly. It's easy to follow. It's colorful, and there's little points of entry. If you really love cheese, you can read about the cheese. If you don't, you go read about the mustard. I really like this one.
Can you give us a sense of how much time it would take to design something like that?
To design, I think you could do. I imagine that the art director would sit down and could do this idea, this sketch, really quickly. You know, it's 3 columns, and they said in the middle column we want either an illustration or a photograph or some representation of the hamburger exploding, and off to the left and the right, with call-outs, we're going to give additional information about each one of those condiments or components to the hamburger. So I think the structure is very straightforward and allows people to interpret it. Then you'd have to hire a photographer to do that, and that's a little bit harder than you think. I've done some food, or art-directed food photography, and you'd be surprised how quickly green lettuce doesn't look so fresh under camera lights, or the mustard starts to run or leaves a little bit of water next to it, or the ketchup and the mustard start to blend together. For all we know, they may have been shot individually and all photoshopped together. That would be the bulk of it. And at the same time, what did they do? They did something very interesting. They mixed here. This is an actual photo divided up of the burger as well as the buns. I think that's one bun just made smaller. A photograph of the bottle, but then the cheese is done more graphically. So, I mean, it's easy after you've seen it to sort of figure out how it was done, but I think that could have been presented very clearly to an editor, to an art director, and could be executed relatively easy. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, but not in terms of time. Like how many many hours would we be talking about? If you wanted to buy this, you want this, how much would it cost? How long would it take to deliver?
I do a lot of photo shoots. If you could do the photo shoot in a half a day. It would take several hours to do that if you got somebody who knew what they were doing. Maybe a day, and then they would set up these other shots and do them. And depending on the quality of photographer you want, you can pay anything from $300 a day to $1,500 a day. And then it has to go to the designer and redesign. And then all of a sudden you go, I think we'll illustrate this. That'll be much cheaper. Here's one that was all words. I was captivated by this, but look at 36 rules for social media. And social media is, I think they're really good too. Update your page or delete it. Become BFFS with your Facebook reps. Your fans own your brand. You know, a bunch of things that are really important for those people who are into social media. And here's, through trial and error, here's the things that you really need to pay attention to. And there's 36 of them. To start to introduce imagery into this would be awful. It would be just too much. I think people are going to stop and read that page. It's been done by one artist. The color palette keeps your eye moving around. I like to think, I like to work in triangles. This person does too. See the white, 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 so your eye's moving. Yellow, yellow, yellow. The reds are spaced apart. There's blue, blue, blue. The greens are moving around. Things that visually you, as a designer, you have to be aware of. How do I keep somebody moving and not get stuck at one place? There is white type on top of the color, black on top of the color, color on top of the color. It's all legible. There's italic, there's some script, but it's all from one person's hand, so it all feels harmonious.
Bottom text integral to the design?
Yeah, the bottom text, I'm not going to be able to read this. Oh my goodness. It's a reference to each one of them, and I think it's the sources. Yeah, which is pretty nice.
Just a question about that. Are the numbers running left to right and then down the page? I just can't quite see it.
1, 2,
What's the
3,
order of it?
4, 5,
Okay.
6, 7, 8, 9,
Okay, so
10. So it's going.
yeah.
It's fairly
So that's
orderly.
helpful.
I didn't notice that before. That's helpful, though, isn't it? I quite like this one. Look at how little wording is on this. This is called the digital dump. It's about the amount of, when we're through with our digital phones, TVs, whatever we have, where is that actually going? And I love that this forms like a skeleton, made up of all components, speakers, components, you know, the teeth. Electronic waste is piling up around the world at a rate of 40 million tons per year. Infographics can so quickly tell you how serious, how hurtful, how important, how bad, how good something is, very quickly. Where the stuff is going, when e-waste, you know that North America ships a lot of it to China.
Yeah.
Have you seen Ed Bertinsky's something landscape? Manufactured landscape, and you see all the stuff that goes over there, and they're picking through and taking out the gold and the nickel, and it's just awful. It's affecting the water table. But I thought that was very interesting. Where is the stuff going to be looked after? But I think it's remarkable how little, other than the paragraph that opens it up, how little type there is, and what a quick read this is. Lots of white space, so you don't feel, no grounds, no 45-degree angle this way, or stripes across a yellow piece of paper, nothing too cute. But it's powerful, it's impactful. Did everybody see the skull at first?
No, it's like bubbles of text.
Can you comment on the color choice?
I'd rather hear what you have to say. How do you read the color?
It's a lot of red. It doesn't tell me
On one
anything
side.
other than it's red.
Yeah, it's interesting that although the reason the one side is red is these pieces are all pulled out. These pieces here, although the scale's a little weird, I believe that's like an iPhone, a smartphone, tablet. These components, if you look closely, are all in here. So there's a correlation between this 40 million tons, here's a bunch of junk, and then it's pulling out individual components. The United States produces 3.3 million tons of e-waste in a year. China produces 2.6 million tons. The United States throws out on average, this is good, oh, and 26 million, each year they throw out 25 million telephones, 47.5 million computers. Sorry, 100 million cell phones. I don't know what the other top one is. Can I just turn this around? This is always drives graphic designers nuts. Here's what this actually looks like. And it is true of everything that you've seen today. Everything is darkened down. So that's much more impactful, right?
Yes.
I wish, and guess what? There is no, as far as I know, there is no projector out there that will do justice to this. They haven't got that technology figured out yet. So I guess, let's go back to your color question. I guess they've used a different palette over here to differentiate itself from that story. However, if you look at that argument, that story, recycle versus disposal annually, so recycle versus disposal here, so they're sort of correlated because they're definitely the similar palette. So I guess that works. It's a very good question, and I love color, and I lecture on color. And color, people respond to color much more than we give them credit for. And color is really, I do a whole lecture on color used in logos. And orange, just as an example, orange is used by A&W, Home Depot, pardon? ING, that's not a good example yet. But by things that are inexpensive, fast food, meant to be economical, right? Hermes uses orange. I forget, it's also used for really high-end things. So somebody would say to you, well, use orange because orange talks about being economical and like budget rent-a-car is orange. And they go, well, no, there's whole other side where they use orange for the exact opposite. Green, don't get me started on green. Well, we're really misusing the color green. If you have a product and you want it to come across as being really consumer friendly and you're good for the environment, let's just make our package green. Let's not change a damn thing about the ingredients or the construction or the components in it. Let's just make it green. It's called greenwashing. And you're starting to see it disappear because guess what? As consumers, we demand more than that. So thankfully that's going away. But the world has been inundated with green logos. You watch, you go through a magazine, you go through a newspaper and look at the gas, the energy people who've got a green logo out there. Come on. I mean, I don't want to be negative about it, but it's people stop reading and thinking and they look at a color and all of a sudden they go, green, oh, you must be good. And it doesn't work that way. The other one that's really I'm fascinated by, have I got time to talk like this? I remember the first time I went into Loblaws into the food section and I saw their new diet conscious food that's called the Blue Label or something? Blue Menu. And I went, blue, you do not use blue for food. Blue is associated with the cleaning aisle. Blue means clean and fresh air, water, and all of a sudden they're putting with food. That's a no-no, but it's working. And maybe it's because it was different and successful.
Sounds fun.
So I love color, we talk about it all night, but color is really important when you bring it into infographics. Yeah.
As a choice also has a black menu line of food.
Yes, the new one.
I bet you love that.
My wife loves it, I don't like it. I find it them trying to be a little too sophisticated. And guess what? I don't go to Loblaws to be sophisticated. Would you agree? I don't want to go in there and find like a real designer box of pasta. Because I just I don't believe them. And I don't mean to be a negative person, but I'm a designer. I know what goes into font choices, how it's put on the shelf, the package, the photos. You can sell somebody on that whole thing, and it may not be true. Is it good? Have you tried it?
My bacon marmalade is delicious.
Oh, so I have to lighten up. Sorry, the question over here?
The comment that the way your color is distorted is kind of something to keep in mind for when you're putting things online, because you have no idea what someone's monitor is going to be.
Yeah, and as graphic designers, that drives us crazy. The best thing you can do is put it out of your mind. Design it the best. No, really, because you have no idea how it's more. You could have two monitors that are the same company at the same time. Humidity affects them. All the ambient light in a room affects them. Do your best with the computer have good computers for your designers and yourself, so what you're doing is good. Have people that are knowledgeable about it, but don't. If you get crazy trying to adjust it for everything, you'll never win because it's impossible. I think screens, the resolutions are getting better, so that's helping dramatically. I'm constantly signing checks to Apple because we're updating our equipment and getting new screens, and the resolution on screens now is just, it's like watching, I don't like watching Blu-ray because it doesn't look real, it looks too fake. Well, computer screens are getting to the point where everything just looks so fantastic. And then you look at it, you print it out, or you go to print, you go, oh, that's a letdown. And it's rear illuminated. You've seen famous Canadian photographer Jeff Wall, other photographers are actually in a gallery, are putting their artwork in lit boxes when they're displaying them because they just feel so wonderful and it accentuates the color and that aura that comes out of the box. So screens, I assume they'll get better, but I wouldn't worry about it from a design point of view of how you can control the color. Any other questions? Yeah? Yeah.
I had a question about the tools that you mentioned. You mentioned there was a program that
Yeah.
a company could purchase. What was that program, please?
Oh boy, you know what?
Or did you mention the name?
I'm a visual guy, I just find a nice slide and throw it up there.
Yeah, that one.
Infographics Master Collection.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And just key in like I would do, go to Google and key in infographic software programs.
Okay.
And see how many different ones would be out there. This one I love. I have to tell you, I love this one. I think it's orderly. Does Congress look like America? I just found this was such an interesting subject matter. They took the members of Congress, their age, their sex, their ethnic background, their economic background, and said, these are the people who are in Congress representing us. And if we look at them as a whole, how does that correlate to what America's actually like? And you can imagine it's nothing like that at all. So here's a beautiful use of color. A very limited palette, maybe 2 colors where you've got maybe it's 3, but different tones. There's black, there's a muted, I guess it's more than 3, but it's a very muted, overall nice palette, but it's big headlines to get you into it. Didn't get too wrapped up in drawing the individuals. It's orderly, it's got this hit of red at the back, at the bottom, which is kind of nice. It's talking about taking action. This was put out by Take Part it was encouraging people to vote, so it was put out prior to the vote. So there was actually a call to action at the bottom. And at the bottom it says, take action, make your voice heard, register to vote at takepart.com Tuesday. So if this was put out by a citizens group or an actual political party, I'm not sure. But what a nice way to get that message across, that the Congress isn't really representative of the American population. And does anybody here work on corporate nights? And I don't mean to, I got this at home. This is editorial, this is an ad. This is awful placement. I'm sure that the people at Vail, they just decided to design, and you're seeing a lot more of this. You're seeing companies and corporations using infographics for their ads because they read quickly and they get the story across. Unfortunately, that got put next to quite an interesting graphic about education in America. If you're not paying attention, and you know this as editors, when ads start to look a little too editorial and spreads or your layouts start to look a little too corporate, if that's possible, they get mixed up. And you open this page and you go, if you weren't paying attention, you go, whoa, what am I looking at here? It's a mess. So my apologies to corporate nights. I don't mean to single them out, but this is, I think, I just don't know how that would get placed next to that. I'm sure both people were very upset about it. And if we were to analyze this, you are asking people to digest way, way too much information. Here they're a mining company, is that correct? Yeah. And here is I think it's these are little elevator shafts, like mine shafts. So here's what's happening below the ground, and here's what we're doing as a company. And then when you come up above ground, here's what we're doing, and here's how it's affecting the world, which is not a bad idea. But you're asking somebody to look at a little tiny drawing here, and then bigger ones up here. There's no consistency here. And what's the takeaway? If you walk away from this, the deeper we dig down, the further we extend our reach. Okay, maybe that's the takeaway, and you read all this and you get that. But they would have been better to make this into several ads, or an editor need to say, what is the 3 main things we want to get across here? And that's the end. So, by the way, that's what they look like. So much nicer, much cleaner. So, other questions? Does that all seem to, yes?
These 2 questions might connect to each other. The first question is, how do you respond to Edward Tufte's work? And the second question is, what books on design would you particularly recommend?
You have to enlighten me as to who Edward Tufte is. I've heard the name.
He wrote, well, in the States I'm told he's the great guru. But he's the one who wrote the big display of quantitative evidence. He wrote Envisioning Information, Beautiful Evidence, and there's one more in the sequence, which I've forgotten. But the first one deals with pictures of numbers, pictures of nouns, that's Envisioning Information. Third deals with pictures of verbs, that's fourth and most recent is Beautiful Evidence. And they deal different. But I'm told that he is the great guru in design. And when I did a doctorate in information science, we did some work in design for there. And it was all Tufte's work. So you don't know Tufte at all?
No, so it shows you I'm just a crappy designer. No, I don't mean to, I don't know that, and I should know that. When I hear you talk about that, that's the kind of thing that would really interest me. But would I be correct in saying it's maybe tipping on the more intellectual academic side of things?
No.
No?
No. I would say, though, that Tufte's approach tends towards the principles, say like Orwell, he says, if you have to cut out the word, always take it out.
Yeah.
With Tufte's, approach, everything has to be there for a reason. And a difficulty I'm having with a lot of what's being shown here, I keep saying, okay, that line doesn't need to be there,
Yeah.
take it out. That legend doesn't need to be there, take it out. But most of what I'm looking at here, I don't think Tuffy would like at all. You know, that would include some of the stuff that you like.
Yeah.
Like visually, he doesn't, he's the one that promotes the famous graph of Napoleon's invasion of Russia. He calls it the greatest graphic ever entered into print.
And when was that done, the graphic?
Oh, would have been at some point in 1800s.
Okay.
You've seen it, for one, where it's elongated when it goes into Russia. And that's the famous one.
Well, I find that fascinating, and I will look it up, because I do like someone who's looking at it so focused and so deeply. I would go back to the audience. Who's your audience?
Well, some people say the same thing.
But a lot of your audience nowadays, they don't like to read. They want information really fast. They're being given information in sound bites.
That's Tuffy to a T.
Okay.
It really is. Stucky's the only book that ever made me almost miss a stop on my bus.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I should know that, and I apologize.
He publishes his own books by Graphics Press, plus a series, it's 4 in the sequence so far.
Yeah.
Plus a series of shorter books that deal with the topic as well.
And when is he still alive?
Oh, yeah.
And when was his last book published?
Beautiful Evidence was approximately 2010.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't. I wish I could.
Oh, okay, but then another question.
Yeah, the follow-up.
Okay, the follow-up question is, what are the books you do recommend?
I don't have any books that I would recommend. Personally, I don't go to books. I'm a little suspect of somebody who is going to. I go to examples, individual examples. I was never taught graphic design or illustration by looking at books. There's no textbook to teach illustration. There's a textbook on graphic design history, but it changes so much, and there's so many different points of view. And there's my wife went to OCA here before OCAD University, and she was taught in a Swiss school of design, so it's very different than a North American style of design. So if you were to have, my experience in anything I learned was never done through a textbook, because it would change right away, or it would be very confusing to have many points of view. So, and at the risk of not sounding like an idiot, illustration graphic design is a visual world, and the visual world is interpretive. So for one person, unless Tuffy or somebody else can come along and give you many different options,
He does.
then the other thing is, at the risk of offending my fellow designers and visual people, I was brought, I'm not ashamed to admit, I'm an observer. I see the world, people tell me, I see the world different. That's what I do, I see things, and I take great solace in that. I like that. I see things that other people don't, and that's true of a lot of visual people. They get their information from just seeing things. It doesn't mean that they're not readers and want to understand it and further read about it, articulate it, and place it in its context. I'd much rather see the visuals. I tell you, when I walk out of here, I'm looking at the lines on the lines painted on the road and how they're interacting with one another and the patterns they're forming. I'm looking at the buildings next to, that's the way I'm wired. It doesn't mean that I'm better than anybody else, I'm just wired to look at visual stuff. So when somebody comes along, and I'm fascinated because I'm reading way more in my life, so I like when I hear somebody pull this all together, but I could never learn that way. I had to take the road that I did to get there. And I think I'm digging myself deeper with every reading.
What about William Playfair's work?
Who?
Playfair?
You know, if you were going to give a lecture sometime, I'll be the first one. I don't know that thing either.
Oh, okay, just FYI. He did the commercial political atlas in 1789 and the statistical breviary in 1801. And those are considered the two start points for information graphics. Right. And he gave us both the line graph and the pie chart. Now, there's a tendency not to like the pie chart for many reasons. But the line graph started with Playfair. And his whole point, information graphics, if you're doing quantitative work, is that a huge tray of numbers is beyond the ability that the human might have.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so you create your numerical
Yeah.
representation, and it's the quality of representation. It allows for immediate access
Yes.
of information.
Sure.
That is where Play for a Start Point is. And those are the two books, you see, that it all supposed to rest on.
Right.
Sorry, can I ask you?
Sounds fascinating.
Question, Mr. Grant, because I was talking earlier today about that I have back in both print and television.
Yeah.
I was watching this. It's sort of overwhelming. It's hard to keep up with trends. But one thing I'm wondering is with the evolution of 3D stuff, what's going to happen to infographics if you use 3D video? Like, are you in your agency working on 3D infographics?
We're-
Where you can go into
Yeah, we're
it?
starting to, we partner
Wow.
we partner with people who do it, but it's coming and happening. And or animated infographics are amazing. They're amazing. And what's happening is the people who, the younger generation who are tweeting and looking at stuff on their phone, and they're not using the phone, they're using Facebook, and now they're not using Facebook, they're using Instagram. They are becoming really visual people. So to get their attention, once you start animating and making it dimensional, you add another level for them. It's gonna happen and it's gonna come, and we're all gonna be doing that at some point, and then there'll be something the next thing. And I used to be, as a 55-year-old man, concerned about, can I stay up with this? And I go, this is fantastic. We get on and we ride that train, and if we miss it, we miss it. And if we don't understand it all, it's okay. And I don't have a Facebook page, I don't get it. And I don't tweet, but I love Pinterest. And I'm getting better at texting. And I see the benefits of it. So it's coming, and dimensional stuff, it's exciting. When you go to a website and all of a sudden you see a pie chart actually grow and come at you, but to your point, you want to make sure it's got a purpose. It's just not a gimmick. And it's like desktop publishing. It'll go through that gimmicky phase where everybody tries it and gets that out of their system, and then they'll go, what is the real purpose of this?
Sir, we can just take one last question, and we'll have, if you can stick around for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So if
I'm on a
anyone
roll.
else has any other questions, I'm just being mindful of the time, so.
Yes.
Hi. Do you either test infographics before you release them or evaluate them after they're released, and how would you do that?
Giving this whole presentation, I have to admit we don't use a lot of infographics. We use them in annual reports. We use classic pie charts and bar charts. So we don't use a lot of them. As much as I like them, to be honest, we just don't work for the right kind of clients or publications where it would be suitable. I would suggest that you do test them. You need to test them outside of your own office, right? Because everybody gets accustomed to looking at it and they go, oh yeah, that's a time clock punch thing. You told me it was. And then you take it home, you show it to somebody you know, and they go, what is that big monster garbage can looking? So I think it's important to do that with any visuals you do. We do that a lot. My passion is branding. I love making logos. And we test, we will work with a client, show them, and everybody's happy, and I'll say, you've got to take it to a small select group and test it. We've done that to make sure that we haven't talked ourselves into this, or are we missing something? So the long-winded answer is we don't do it ourselves with infographics, but we do it with many of the other things we do, and I think it's invaluable what you learn. We do believe very strongly in getting as much information back after we've done a publication or any project to see if it's met. I mean, that's how we all learn. Now, people will say they do that, and they don't do that. We try our best to do that. You know, where can we get better and improve and try something different? Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us and giving us editors the tools tools to make us feel more confident when working with infographics. So on behalf of the EAC Toronto, please accept this small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
And also the donation that's been made on your behalf to Literature for Life.
Oh, that's great.
We have 2 door prizes this evening. What I'm going to do is pass around these ballots. If you can just put your name and also topic suggestions for 2014. So this is our last program for 2013. We don't have one in December, and so we have a fabulous holiday party to look forward to. So if there's a topic that you'd like to see in the new year, please let us know. So I'll pass these around, and we'll draw 2 winners.